Hello and welcome. I'm Debbie Atuk. I'm a Bering Straits Native Corporation shareholder and the treasurer of the board. Thanks for joining us today. Millions of federal dollars have been allocated for infrastructure improvements in the state of Alaska, and I'm interested in tracking those projects, the opportunities that they bring, and in particular, what projects might be available for Alaska Native-owned businesses. I'm especially happy to talk about the Nome Arctic Deep Draft Port Project, which is so crucial to the Norton Sound region. My guest today is Joy Baker, who has worked for the port for more than 30 years, including 16 as the harbor master. Originally from Texas, she came to Alaska as a musician. After traveling the state, she settled in Nome and transitioned into construction and mining. In May this year, Joy stepped down as the director of the port to focus her energy on the expansion, a longtime passion for her since commercial traffic began increasing in the Arctic. When the deep port expansion is complete, Nome will be able to accommodate larger vessels. This is especially important with navigation, opening across Northwest Passage. And with that, I would like to welcome you, Joy. Thank you so much for being here. I've followed this project for years, and I'm really excited about learning about it from you.
Thank you, Debbie. It's good to be here with you. Happy to share information. We want to get the word out so everybody understands the purpose of the project and the current schedule, and that we are pulling the trigger and this is going to be built.
It's so fantastic. So that is my first question right off the bat is, this is a project that is sweeping in scope. So can you just give us a quick primer on the port and what the expansion really means for Alaska, but particularly for the region?
Well, the primary goals of the port are to provide some safe and reliable, efficient marine transportation and navigation for Nome and the region to support, movement of commodities, national security, and tourism. The project will also improve, allow for the staging of assets, which will improve response times to search and rescue activities, oil spill events, and other marine transportation incidents. These are critical components in protecting the Arctic waters and the subsistence food resources. So it's been a long time coming in order to have a location where the vessels can get inside protected waters to conduct their business so that we can have this activity performed on a dockside rather than offshore on water for transfers of cargo and fuel and people. We can bring all that inshore, which just increases the safety for the people and reduces oil spill opportunities. That's probably the wrong word for oil spill events, and actually reduces the time that it takes to conduct all these activities, which are normally called lightering activities.
Thank you so much. And so you talked a lot about efficiencies, and I think that's something that we don't focus on very much at a high level, but you and I talked a little bit offline about that, and that made a lot of sense to me, that there are some activities that are happening away from the port that make things more difficult. So moving to another aspect of this improvement and expansion, besides commercial shipping, can we talk about cruise ships and what you're expecting to see in terms of increases in numbers of ships, maybe sizes of the ships? I don't know that we talked about that, and what kind of opportunity that might mean for the local region.
Well, Nome has been a port of call for cruise ships since the mid-90s, and those were generally the adventure cruise that we still see in the 1 to 200 passenger category. They have been gradually increasing. I mean, we used to see 4 or 5 a year. We got up to, 8 or 9. They just gradually migrated. And right before COVID hit, we had 2 years with pretty good numbers that were climbing up into the teens, and we've had there we go, we've had up into the 13 and 14 and 15. Then COVID came in, and the following year was 0. Obviously, as COVID hit, all the other industries in the world. It hit the industry, the tourism industry in Nome. One thing it didn't hit, as people will realize, is the commodity shipping, because that still has to happen. Goods still need to be moved and fuel needs to be shipped. So the one thing we were impacted at 100% level was for the tourism vessels. But we have, last year we had 17, and this year we had 23 scheduled, with 13 calls ultimately in the end due to schedule changes. We already have about 8 scheduled for next year, and this is 3 or 4 months before vessels typically start booking the following year. We had 4 new ships this year with promises of returning, and that returning fleet for 24 would include our ships that we've been seeing for many years, the Crystal ships, the Silver Sea vessels, the Hurtigruten vessels, and the other German fleet, the French vessels. So the vessel numbers are increasing exponentially, and the sizes have been, in the past, the biggest vessel we'd had in port was 464 feet. We have now had a vessel more at the causeway. Of course, we had to use 2 docks, but over 500 feet. That's basically our limit. Giraffe isn't so much a factor with these length of vessels, but the length is just because of the channel width and the dock capacity that we have. The expansion of the port, and we had 4 or 5 ships anchor offshore this year because of their size. The expansion of the West Causeway will provide not only a deeper basin, a 40-foot basin, for any of the very large ships, but moreover for the tourism fleet, it'll provide 2,000 feet of dock space. And the inline portion of that expansion will give us 1,300 feet for the largest ships we see, which right now is the Crystal Serenity and the World ships. Those are the ones that will need that they'll need 1,800 feet of that 1,300 inline portion. And then the shorter portion is 700 feet, but we'll be using the Deepwater Basin for those very long ships. And we will also have 2 400-foot docks added to the east side when phase 3 is done. And we'll be able to accommodate more of the expedition and adventure cruise vessels, so that we'll have options of where to put them. And on the east side of the expansion design, they'll be able to have the foot traffic will be able to access town without having to get on buses, which was one of the long-term goals we've had, of trying to get the cruise ships off the west side where all the industrial traffic is, for safety, but also to get folks the ability to get off the ship and walk.
Well, and so that brings me to one of the areas that I'm particularly interested in, and I'll mention that our late mayor, Richard Beneville, operated a tourism company, right? So if he were still with us, I would definitely like to hear him talk about how excited he must be up there about what it means for foot traffic in town. So as it stands now, if a ship is lightering people in, I guess, I don't know, use lightering for people, portaging, then do fewer people get off the ship then, because they're not so thrilled about transferring to a smaller boat or craft to get to land? What I'm thinking is, I'm just assuming that if you're pulled right up to the dock, to the port, that people will be able to just walk off, and you'll have more people, more foot traffic in Nome.
I think you're right. And I think that, any of the folks with disabilities may have second thoughts about getting off the vessel into the dinghies or tenders that call them and come into shore. And the other thing is, being connected to the dock, they're able to come and go more, which includes the crew. They're able to come and go. Now, they do have the tenders on a round robin schedule so that they can take folks to and from the ship and also move the goods in stores, supplies and mail and medicines and everything else you can imagine that they need to restock while they're in port. Those vessels are also doing that, but I think that it does pose challenges. It's good to see that a lot of people do get off the ships and ride the tenders in, but I'm certain that it doesn't capture everyone. And we want to get all of them into the dock so that, it's not uncommon for Nome to see a little bump on what I call a bump on the water in the afternoon, because we get that little afternoon wind and you get the wind waves on top of the water, a little chop. And, folks then have to contend with that. The ship will give them a lee and block the waves, but then they've got to ride them into shore. And some of the older folks just lose interest. So they'll come in the morning and then go back. But I think that, being able to bring them in just takes all of that out of the picture and allows them to come and go freely when they're tied to the dock.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I just intuitively, and I keep thinking about the articles that we saw when the Crystal Serenity would come into town and how there would be days set up at Old St. Joe's where there would be a crafts market. And I'm anticipating that with a larger ships mean more passengers per ship and more ships per season, that we're going to see potentially, hopefully, some permanent stores or stores maybe that are open for the season, right? Instead of just like a shop at a public space. So the little mini convention center is just not going to cut it, I think, in a few years. What about, let's talk about this is something that I question. We talked a little bit about it. So I kind of know what you might be thinking about this, but I'm going to ask my question anyway. And that is, do more ships coming into port carrying more freight, does that mean that we might see a reduction in the exorbitant high costs of building materials? This is something that Nome has such a terrible problem with, a housing shortage. And part of it has to do, as we know, with just the cost of materials and the short season for shipping, and we're limited with dock space. So if we increase our dock space, we have more ships coming in per day. Are we going to get more goods and maybe lower prices, do you think?
Well, there have been many discussions on that question, and it has been the most common question of all on the port expansion. It's in my opinion, it stands to reason that providing more safe navigation to transit in and out of the port and in and out of the existing outer harbor and would reduce shipping costs. And the reason I say that is because we still have many lost weather days, even since the Corps built the East Breakwater in 2005 and 6, we still have those lost weather days where not only can, from a certain direction, they can't even work at the docks. And from another direction, from the southwest, it makes the channel more difficult to navigate, especially if you have to put vessel to vessel, which is tug to barge up on the hip, they call it, to navigate it through the entrance, which is only 500 feet at the waterline. And some of these vessels are pretty good size. Almost all of the barges and tugs that are moving cargo and freight, the barges are 400 feet long and 100 feet wide. And then you have a barge on the side. You come into the entrance, you hit a current, and then you have the winds and the waves to adjust to. So you have many things to do at the point where you hit the current to make sure you stay off the rocks. It's no easy feat. We have some very experienced captains. We've had a few that have had a few owies here and there for the misjudgment. But for the most part, it's always been a challenge, and we hear that from the captains. So providing the protection of that kind of removes the unknown of whether when I get to know them, can I get in? There's also a camera now that shows the entrance that they can see the conditions existing. But in the future, that camera is going to show them how nice the water is with that big L-shaped protective breakwater that is going to make navigating in and out of the port and remove the unknowns for being able to operate and get in the additional dock space, eliminates the congestion factor. And then they'll be able to know that I can meet my schedule. I'll have my dock space. The weather's not going to be a complication. Now, of course, when it comes to things like Murbach, all bets are off because even with the new port, we're not going to be working during that. But for all the other general weather conditions and the mild storms, we'll be able to, move freight and move fuel in that protected area. So yes, when we're talking about eliminating congestion, eliminating the lost weather days, and providing the protected area, I don't see how that will improve efficiencies for shipping, and how that wouldn't translate to reduce costs for shipping with the carriers. I don't know how that would happen. I don't know how, unless inflation continues to climb and eats up those efficiencies. I don't know how they couldn't benefit the shippers and in turn benefit the residents.
I hope it will. My fingers are crossed.
Yes,
That
yes,
we're
mine too.
definitely hopeful about. We didn't really talk too much about this, but we touched upon the fact that nearby there's a large graphite project that has been getting a lot of press these days.
Yes.
And you anticipate that with this design that's been approved by the Army Corps of Engineers, that you would be able to meet their needs for shipping material according to their schedule that they have right now.
Yes, we actually could accommodate the majority of the original product volume that they predicted. We can accommodate that now with the southbound barges. At least that's what we've been advised by the barge fleet when they go southbound back to the lower 48 and Anchorage and Seward and that. And as that volume has increased, that they've learned that their resource is much larger, I'm very confident that, that we would migrate into being able to accommodate that. We've got the laydown space. The barge companies have the southbound capacity. They also understand that, should that capacity should the volume exceed their capacity, they would add more vessels on. But the expansion would essentially just improve that efficiency by being able to eliminate those unknowns I described earlier, and then being able to export the ore without worrying about losing weather days or having to wait for dock space and things like that. So yes, we can accommodate a portion of their volume now, and we'll be able to accommodate all of their volume in the future.
And I'm really glad that I thought to add that on, since we had a couple of extra minutes here, because I believe I've seen something in the press recently about how the project actually needs to be increased for it to be profitable. So like massively increased. So we'll see what that means in terms of numbers for the amount of shipments that will have to be shipped out of state. But I'm assuming where there's a will, there's a way. So
I think so. I think so. And there's definitely a will, and there's a demand for the resource, a significant demand.
Right, exactly. I really appreciate you coming on here. And if you have anything that you want to share with people who might be listening from Alaska, who might have questions, are there any upcoming public hearings? I know sometimes people find out about opportunities to hear about updates late. So do you have anything coming up that people will be able to attend that we can talk about?
I did reach out to try and see if there was anything new, just for that very reason. So I don't have anything at this time. I think there's still discussion about doing a public meeting, but the Corps hasn't gotten all of the elements that would be a part of that meeting compiled yet. So we will certainly keep notices on our website, nomealaska.org, and there's a Port of Nome link on that page to take you to the port page, which talks about the project. I am always willing to answer questions. Folks can reach me on the website. There's a link to reach me, and also there's a lot of documents that we send out from meetings to Nome Announce, and on our Facebook link and on the website that have my email and my cell phone number. Please feel free to reach out. I've got no qualms at answering questions. Even if you have challenging questions, I'll try to answer those too. But by all means, if you have questions, ask them. And if you don't know how to reach me, go to the city council meetings or the port commission meetings and ask your question. We will get you an answer.
I think that's great. And you mentioned before we got started that the mayor of Nome actually knows quite a bit about this. And then there's also
Yes.
the members of the Port Commission, right? So
Yes.
those people are out and about in the community. So I'm glad that we reached that point so we could share that information, because I think some people do still have questions and they haven't made it to some of the meetings yet. So thanks for sharing that. I want to thank you so much again for being here.
Sure.
And I look forward to observing how this development continues and what positive changes I no doubt it's going to bring to our region. And I want to thank you for your hard work in making this project a reality for us.
Thank you, Debbie. I really appreciate that. It's been fun. This has not always felt like a job. I've actually enjoyed pushing this project for the last, I don't know how many years, 15 maybe.
Well,
yeah.
I think it's going to be a great case study. I look forward to it being taught in business schools.
Excellent. Well, thanks for reaching out and inviting me.
All right, we'll talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye.
Okay. Take care. Bye, followers.